Were you ever that 1 in 1 million? If so, what's your story? I am a 19-year-old male. In August of last year, I was driving with my sister when suddenly her face turned cold. "Gavin, your eyes are yellow," I remember her saying. I quickly pulled down the passenger's mirror, and to my horror, 2 yellow eyes radiated back at me. Fast forward, I spent a month being sick. The initial diagnosis was hepatitis A. Went back to the doctor. Nothing was better. Things were worse in fact. Was sent to the then to the liver transplant unit at UCSF. By this point my eyes had turned muddy orange, and my pee was the color of a mahogany tree. Anyways, the team of liver doctors at UCSF managed to save my liver. I was diagnosed with autoimmune hepatitis. Oh, and my eyes are white again. Hey, I have that too. I was in the hospital for a solid week and they tested me for everything under the sun until they finally realized that I had autoimmune hepatitis. I was in so much pain leading up to going to the hospital that when I walked, I could feel every bone in my feet, and if someone bumped into me and hit my arms, it was excruciating. They originally thought I had cancer. When I was 14 years old, I woke up one day with heavy stomach cramps. We called the hospital and they told us that I probably have a stomach flu and should go to the doctor next morning. After one of the worst nights ever, vomiting and sleeping next to the toilet, we went to the doctor. I had a fever of 40 degrees Celsius and was aching a lot. The doctor told me my appendix was inflamed and causing pain. We went to the and I stayed in the hospital for about 2 weeks, but they couldn't find anything. They treated me with broad range antibiotics and after 2 weeks I was feeling a bit better and they told me to go home and recover. The night I got back from the hospital I went to bed and started hallucinating that I lived in a retirement home and that pirates were coming to steal our food. So I was flailing around trying to fend off pirates when my mother came in and asked what all the fuss was about. I told her what was going on and she looked at me like I had summoned a devil. She took my temperature and she instantly took me to the O again. I had a 41 degrees Celsius fever. When we went back to the hospital I got treated immediately for inflammation and they did a wide range of tests again. They saw that something in my body was inflamed but they couldn't find it. I stayed in the hospital for about 2 more weeks when they finally found what was going on. My appendix was inflamed and burst the night I was having the hallucinations, but on all the scans they couldn't see my appendix. The doctor told me that if I came in 2 days later I would have died because of the pus flowing in my body. Apparently there is a 1% chance of all the appendix cases that the appendix is so stretched out that they couldn't see it on the scans, or that the area was so inflamed they didn't see it. So after staying on antibiotics for about 2 more weeks they finally removed my appendix and all the pain was gone. I stayed in the hospital for over 4 weeks just because of my appendix and my bad luck on being that 1%. I was diagnosed with leukemia. I got a bacteria growth which killed the leukemia. A real 1 in 1 million chance. Edit. I almost died thanks to that bacteria though. Edit. THX for the silver and gold kind strangers. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. How I met my wife. I'm from the Netherlands. She is from the US. We met in Israel. It was my first weekend in Israel. Decided to go on a pub crawl to meet some people and have fun. As I'm buying the ticket my now wife walks up to the counter to also buy our ticket. The girl working there introduces us. We hit it off the first night, but I'm leaving in 2 days to stay with friends of friends in the middle of the desert for 3 months. 2 days after I leave I lose my phone. Don't have any way to get back in touch with her. I had little money and could stay work with the people in the desert. But I kept thinking about her, so after a week I say I'm leaving. Take the next bus. Goes 3 times a week. At 5 AM. And then a train to Tel Aviv. I had no idea how to find her, where to stay and very little money. I emailed hostels to find a work-stay agreement. Those jobs are very popular and usually planned months in advance. I get an email when I arrive in Tel Aviv. I can come in for an interview because they have a spot. This is already ridiculously lucky. Right after the interview and dropping off my belongings, I went back to the first hostel to see if they would give me information. They wouldn't give me anything. Now I'm at a loss. Tel Aviv is a city of more than 500,000 people. I don't know anyone and have little more than the clothes on my back. Kind of defeated, I start wandering around exploring the city. After a couple hours I get hungry and decide to treat myself to a restaurant. I'm well out of the tourist area and find a place that's almost empty and rather cheap. I sit down, order a drink and something to eat. As I get my food I see my now wife walking past the restaurant. She sees me, I see her. I'm literally dumbstruck and just kind of grin and wave. Remember how I lost my phone? She didn't know that and just thought I ignored her. She waves and keeps walking. I throw like 200 shekels, way too much, on the table and sprint after her. Explained, and the rest is history. When I was a kid, I was chilling in the water of the Mediterranean Sea in Turkey. Suddenly I felt an awful burning sensation on my stomach and my legs. I looked like I had been brutally sandpapered and I got a 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, fever. Turns out I made contact with a jellyfish, and later found out that it hadn't happened on that beach for 10 years or so. I was just extremely unlucky. What beach was it? I got a really minor jellyfish sting when I lived in Turkey also. No idea on the rarity at that beach though. It was in Alanya, 22 years ago. No sure about the odds on this one, but I survived a non-survivable plane crash. I was on an old Po-2, famous for being very safe and uncrushable, on a tour of the desert in western China when I was like 7. My father's friend who hosted me and piloted the plane didn't survive, but somehow I got out with a concussion and apparently passed out for almost a day in the middle of the desert, in the wreckage of the crash, 50 kilometers from the town port, on the edge of the desert. The people who found me were some tree planters. They plant greens in the desert to protect towns from sandstorm. A lot of people live in these desert towns in China do this. Found me on their way picking up a shipment, and the only reason they looked was BC they were making a bet on how fast the egg would cook in the sand and went off the road to test. Edit. First thing first, according to legends, 15 minutes. I never tested it though. So, according to my dads, the theory that I might have lived was because the plane was mostly made out of fabrics and wood. So when the plane crashed, the front half collapsed and took the majority of the impact. Though I got knocked out, I was probably covered under the wreckage and in the shades. It cooled me off enough to survive for a day or so. That's awesomely unbelievable. Did it make you afraid to fly, or fearless? Nah, TBH. I didn't remember enough for it to actually cause like a traumatic experience or something. One day you'll be making eggs and it will all come back in a dramatic flashback starring Nicolas Cage. I was in 2 separate car crashes in 2 separate cars in less than 45 minutes apart. Also, go to Shark Boy. Edit. I wasn't the driver for either crash. First car was hit from the side. Friend came and picked us up. Car lost traction and we slid off the road and hit a pole. Neither was that bad, just poor timing. I was 2, if you count the ambulance. Someone pulled out in front of me and I hit them because I had no time to brake. Had some bad back pain, so an ambulance took me to the hospital. On the way there, someone pulled out in front of them. What kind of ninwit pulls out on an ambulance? I slept wrong one night and pinched a nerve in my neck so severely I lost the right side of my body. It just went silent like it wasn't there for months. I woke up in the worst pain I've ever experienced and couldn't talk, move or do anything. The doctor thought I was having a stroke. My doctor had never seen a case as severe as mine and it was purely a freak accident. Recovery took months, but I have use of my leg and hand again, with some numbness. Other than pain and spasms, I'm mostly back to normal. I hate reading stuff like this. If you're not safe lying asleep on a mattress, where are you safe? If it makes you feel better, the chances of it happening are smaller than dying in a fire in your sleep. Wife is going to make sure we never sleep again. That's basically how I calm myself while taking off on a plane. Relax. Your dad drove you to school by car each other day for several years, and each ride you were a lot more likely to die than you are right now. A bird got into my room through a tiny hole in the ceiling and took a shit on me. Burp. He looked so angry that he got caught, lol. Unhand me human. Get your filthy palms off of me, you barbarian. Do you know WHOIM? Had 2 11 centimeters benign tumors growing in my spine, resulting in gradual paralysis from my chest down. They had no idea how the tumors formed. Surgery took 11 hours when they thought it would take 4 because the tumors were so complexly woven throughout my spine. I now have pretty much half a spine and chronic pain, but I'd take that over losing my life from paralysis and being unable to breathe. Edit. Wow. Thank you for all the support. I didn't realize this was going to blow up as much as it did. If anyone has specific questions and wants to message me, feel free. I am at your service. Thanks again for all the support and love. It made my day. Hugs and kisses. My dad has this, -1 of the tumors. Experienced not so severe back pain his whole life. One day just became unbearable, but doctors said you're just getting old. Go home and take some Advil. LOL. My dad said frick that. Went to a private clinic and had an MRI done on his back. Wouldn't you know it? Tumor in his spine. About 3 days later, he was on the operating table with one of the best neurosurgeons in the country. Surgery took about 9 hours. Poor Sob felt so much better after the surgery that the next day, he walked and met my mom and I at the hospital doors when we arrived. The first one, I don't know about the exact odds, but I was born on 7,777 and weighed 7 pounds and 7 ounces. Sadly though, I clocked in at 6:50 am. The other is that around the age of 14 I started to notice the outsides of both of my feet starting to get much wider. After a couple of years of buying expensive custom made shoes, they decided to perform surgery on my feet. Turned out I had extra muscle growth along with something else I don't recall at the moment. My podiatrist told me he submitted a scholarly article on it. May also have been genetic, as when my dad was 3, he developed an extra toe growing out of each one of his big toes. What? At 3, I knew you could develop extra toes as a fetus. But at 3, criminy, is no one safe? I think he developed them at 3, or else there was surgery on them at 3. But I know he wasn't born with any showing. Now I'm curious and wish I could find out. Hell. When I was a teenager, I had just started working at the local Sears Auto Center Express Lube shop, and on day 1 did a quick orientation and my first oil change. The manager walked away when he felt I was good to go and the oil change went well. Fast forward a few days later, my manager asked me to come into his office and he explained that the oil filter I had used had one huge flaw. I didn't know what that was, and it turned out the filter was pressed on backwards into the filter can and it wouldn't allow oil to flow in and it damaged the motor. They had to purchase a new motor for the person and I still kept my job. He said it was a 1 in a million chance that would have happened, and it did on my first oil change. They have insurance for a reason. All sorts of weird stuff happened at our Walmart. Defective tires, filters, oil, you name it. They don't hold the employees accountable for their weird stuff. Maybe even the manufacturer of the oil filter covered that because it was a manufacturing defect. I've got the middle toes on both feet webbed, so did Stalin. Quack. This feels like a fun fact but at the same time a threat. Agree. That's a significantly menacing quack. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm only 16, so I hope you didn't cringe from the editing. I hope we can get to 50,000 subscribers because I wouldn't be here without all of you. So thank you so much for your time and energy, and please subscribe.